Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And I'm Adam.
Today, we've got a spoiler review for you for Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, one of the most highly anticipated movies of the year. And if you happen to not know what this movie is about, Adam, would you like to tell the people?
Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. The people of Wakanda fight to protect their home from intervening world powers as they mourn the death of King T'Challa.
Yeah, so, Ryan Coogler's back. The whole rest of the cast is back, plus some new faces, with the notable, obvious exception of Chadwick Boseman, who died. Was it last year, 2 years ago?
I think it was last year.
Either way.
That might have been 2 years.
I feel like it's within the last 18 to 24 months, roughly.
Looking.
But anyway, the movie had to undergo quite a few rewrites because they were kind of pretty far along the progression with the script for Black Panther 2 with Chadwick Boseman and with T'Challa. And instead of recasting him, which I think was the right decision, the character just also died in the Marvel Universe. And they lean into that right away. Right away in this movie, we don't even see him. I'm really glad they didn't try to do any type of digital recreation or whatever, like they've done in some of the Star Wars movies with dead actors from the 70s. So we don't see him at all. We just see his sister trying to save him, and she fails, and then it's funeral time. And for me, at least, I think they nailed the beginning of the movie. It was very emotional, even though you kind of know what's coming. The way that they did it and the performances by Letitia Wright and Angela Bassett at the beginning of this movie, I thought were fantastic. And it was just instantly, you could feel it.
Yeah, agreed. I would agree with that. It kind of felt like the beginning of Avengers Endgame, when it starts on a very somber note, and that can be good, especially if it's such a long movie, and it's going to be a big pillar of a movie as far as this phase of the MCU. So I like that it established kind of like a serious, almost little darker tone. Just immediately you could tell it was different from the most recent Thor movie or Eternals or any of the multiverse stuff. It just felt grounded right away.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Chadwick Boseman's death kind of forced the movie to go in a direction that the MCU doesn't really ever go. I mean, we've seen some character deaths before, and then you get to the end of Endgame, and it's the end of that entire era. Yeah, but you kind of know that's coming, and they've been building to that for a really long time. This was just a straight up shocker, and they treated it that way. And I think it made for an interesting kind of emotional core for this movie and a journey for Shuri and her family, and for Angela Bassett, the Ramonda, now the queen after her son's death. So it was good that they just went right into it. I think it would have been kind of a disaster if they just tried to kind of either recast or sort of weave around it. But steeping the entire story in what do we do now, and how do we move on, and how are we still the same nation and the same family and the same people. I think that was the right decision, and they did that part of it, I think, really, really well. The big emotional moments in this movie worked really well for me. Other issues, which we can get to later, but how do you guys feel about the emotional stuff? I mean, again, we are going to get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen this yet, highly recommend that you just go watch the movie and then come back. But you've been warned, so now we can kind of dive into some other moments, I think, because there are a lot of heavy-hitting emotional moments in this movie, even outside of just T'Challa's death, which is off-screen and at the beginning. They don't let that just kind of happen and then sort of same old Marvel after that.
Yeah, that counts as the serious stuff. Now we're just gonna have fun for the next 2 hours.
Right.
They kept going back to it, and like you said, it's part of like each of the main characters' kind of progression and their arc is how they deal with it and accepting it, and facing the uncertain future. And I thought that was really well. I thought the emotional scenes with Shuri throughout the movie were good, and Angela Bassett. I thought they definitely both did very, very well. And a lot of times when they're together, it's kind of heavier, more emotional scenes, and I thought they nailed that.
Yeah, I think later on in the movie, when we do get Angela Bassett's death scene, the way in which that was handled, I thought was very, very well done. She's also like sacrificing she sacrifices her life for the younger person, the next generation. She knows that she has to kind of move out of the way for Wakanda to move forward. She can no longer be the queen there. I mean, if Shuri's supposed to take the mantle, or if Shuri's supposed to do other things and eventually lead Wakanda, she's got to do it at some point, and she recognizes that she can sacrifice and do that. And it's very sad, and it's I honestly didn't think she was going to die this movie, so I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised.
But I thought it was done very well, and I thought modeling it after the previous funeral that they had already had was a very nice touch in the way that they changed certain aspects and that kind of thing. That was handled very well.
Yeah, I really liked the scene when right after Shuri gets kidnapped and Angela Bassett is talking to Okoye, and like I thought that monologue by her, just kind of expressing the anguish of already losing her son and now potentially losing her daughter, and just the whole like heir to the throne, just everything being messed up. I thought she really carried that scene. That was one of my favorite scenes.
When you can tell she's at like her absolute like last, like her most desperate moment, because she gets rid of the person who's been like her confidant and closest military advisor, like friend in her life, and she doesn't know what else to do. So you can see the power that she has. I thought Angela Bassett was probably the strongest actor in this movie, so I think that helps. She has a lot of emotional scenes to do a lot with, but
I totally agree. I think she gave the best performance in this movie. I think Letitia Wright does a really good job too, kind of carrying a larger role than kind of earlier in this franchise than we were expecting she was going to have to.
Yeah. She was expecting that she would have to.
And everybody was expecting she was going to have to, for sure. And I think that part of the story and her journey stayed engaging all the way through, despite the long runtime here, but kind of keeping her journey moving and having her be the one to sort of meet Namor and get to go underwater to their city. I mean, that just kind of all fit, and it never felt like her part of the story was stagnant or like didn't fit or anything like that. If anything, I would have liked to see some of the other stuff sort of scaled back. That felt like it really felt like they tried to hang on to as many things as they possibly could after Chadwick Boseman's death while changing the story to account for that. And there were some things that just didn't quite really feel like they mattered very much to me, or just kind of felt like shoehorned in or a little done so in a kind of a clunky way. It's just, there's a lot going on in this movie. And I think a good amount of it is just clutter. But I mean, if you just are purely talking about the moments with Letitia Wright and Angela Bassett and kind of the family stuff that they're dealing with, I think they nailed all of that. And that was the high point of the movie for me. Even going all the way into the mid-credit scene, which there is a mid-credit scene. There's no post-credit scene. I'm glad I was tipped off on that before going to the movie.
Yeah.
I think that like the two bookends of this work really, really well, with the reveal of T'Challa's kid. There was a line right at the end that just kind of made me go like, this scene was perfect. And then you just kind of like,
you kind of made it hokey.
Exactly. Where he like says his name. And I was like, didn't we already know exactly who he was?
Yeah.
Like as soon as the kid walked out, it was just like, oh, okay.
Got it.
And then he's like, they even kind of say who he is, and then they like scream who he is. And I was like, we know what?
Yeah,
little issue, but I mean, it was one of my favorite like mid post credit scenes, whatever you want to call it. And I like that they kept it within the Black Panther story and with those characters, because the first movie is one of the most self-contained movies in the entire MCU, and this one attempts to do that for the most part, but adds in some other stuff with kind of Martin Freeman's character, and then what's her name? Is it Dominique Thorne, Riri Williams, where she's introduced? She's going to be in a show next winter, about a year from now, called Ironheart.
Okay.
About her character. So there were just a lot of things going on here, and I think it's kind of clunky outside of the focus on the family stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I literally just saw this, right before recording this podcast. Adam, you saw it like a day ago, and Nate saw it like 5 days ago now. This point?
I saw it last Friday, so I saw it on the
Yeah, so you guys have had a little more time to think about what your favorite scenes were and everything. And because it is so long, there is a lot. So I'm trying to think. But what's coming to mind is almost every one of my favorite scenes was either Shuri or the Queen or both of them. I was even going to mention one of my favorite scenes for sure was her dream sequence where she takes the Black Panther potion, and then it's Killmonger who's like her like spirit that talks to her. I thought that was great.
That really surprised me.
Didn't see it coming, and it actually fit with where she was at. Like, I like that too, because I was like, oh, are they going to commit to like this she wants to burn it all down thing, or is it just going to be something that she looks at and goes, no, that's not me, and keeps moving? But then when he is literally like her spirit person, like it's like, oh, okay, like this actually is where she's at right now. And I felt that really, like, I'm glad they made that decision, and I just thought that was a cool twist.
Yeah, that was cool. The one after that, where then she sees her mom.
Yeah,
that was the only moment where I felt like it would be really nice to have Chadwick Boseman here, because just with the narrative and like the way her arc was, like she needed to talk to T'Challa there, and they couldn't do it, and I totally get it. I don't blame them for it at all. It's better than constructing him or whatever.
Yeah,
but that was the only moment in the movie where I felt like it just makes more sense for his character to be here.
Yeah, agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked early on getting to explore the Talokan head city, and I forget what it's called. That all looked really cool. We just didn't get enough of it, and it's much too dark because it's all CGI'd, obviously. It's much too dark to really get a full like scope and scale of like how cool that was. But I did really like that. I also really hate underwater stuff. So like vast open bodies of water, underwater stuff, like in real life. So the initial like descent into the city was terrifying.
Agreed.
I was like, oh no, there's gonna be some big monster they're gonna like ride in on, and then unfortunately it's just like whales and stuff. But I was very creeped out right away. But that's a memorable scene for me, at least.
I loved what they did with the whales. I thought that was really cool, the way that they called them and then just like grabbed on and rode to wherever they needed to go. I thought that was really interesting. What's the name of like those? I can't remember the name of the Atlantis like city at this point.
But I was just trying to look it up, but I can't. I don't know how to search for it. I searched Wakanda Forever Ocean City, and that did not work.
Wakanda Forever Atlantis. It's Talokan is what it is.
Talokan.
Oh, that's weird because that's the name of the people then too.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, could be that.
Okay,
Talokanese. I don't know. I agree with you, Adam, where I wanted more of that city. It didn't give me the same sense of awe that I did like in the first Black Panther when we see Wakanda for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Or seeing like
kind of felt a little bit like what do people do when they live here?
Yeah.
You know, we
like,
didn't.
Oh, it's just a capital city. It's just like it looks cool. Like
it was like I couldn't picture like how people live their lives there. Was kind of it just felt like okay, now we see that they live under the ocean and it's basically Atlantis, and we can move on now. And there's a lot of them. That's kind of what we got from that. But I think that was fine. But just kind of thinking of other areas where they just spent some time that like, Okoye getting bounced or getting demoted and then kicked out of her order was kind of like, I get it to give her character something to do, but they kind of picked like a lot of characters to have some type of journey with,
even like her old friend who used to be in the guard with her or whatever.
That was so unnecessary.
Like, we don't have room for this character.
I was like, nobody even knows who this is.
Yeah,
and she was like a trainee who just like didn't make it. and then kind of got booted, and then they need her again. But like we spent like 5 minutes with that was just a nothing.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of little moments like that, and then kind of, I mean, like it made sense for the story, but Lupita Nyong'o's little like Spanish speaking, talk to the natives and go in and find this hidden city that nobody else has ever been able to find before in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
There are a lot
That
of things that felt like there were elements of this that felt very like on the level of the first Black Panther movie. And then I think there were other elements that felt sort of sloppy and quick and done in a that's good enough sense that I feel like a lot of phase 4 has given us. Like kind of the like when they go to get Riri in at MIT.
Yeah.
There are elements of those scenes that felt like this is kind of supposed to be funny, but it's clunky and it feels like they only cared to film it like once or twice and they were like good enough.
Yeah.
You know, it like
like
but then the chase was kind of interesting, but then I don't know, that whole part felt very reminiscent of other phase 4 things where I think like we've kind of already talked about the more emotional stuff like within the family felt like on the level of the first Black Panther movie to me.
Yeah, I think this movie suffers from the action not being very good.
I agree.
So like that chase is fun. It just never actually gets anywhere that's interesting.
Also,
like,
I kept thinking
over,
about.
Then you're like, oh, like I was expecting this to like the movie's gonna pop off and something's gonna really start going, and then it just stops right after. Like all the momentum it generates just fades.
Yeah, I kept thinking about the car chase through Seoul in the first one and how amazing that was, and they got all these cool gadgets, and the only times they used gadgets and stuff in this one, for the most part, was to the level of something where I was just like, well, that's just not that realistic. Like, you know, like to the point where I was like, this doesn't even, how do you deal with this? This is just like a magic wand level gadget. But yeah, there weren't really many memorable action sequences. And particularly one that I found slightly disappointing was also probably the best one, but that's also kind of like, I've talked to you guys before about how I really like in stories, it's a very specific thing, but it happens in superhero stuff. And when like the home is attacked, like in X2, when they break into like the school and they're all in danger, and then like the homeland's attacked here, it gives you that like nowhere is safe feeling. That's also where the queen gets killed. But there were elements of that, like when it starts, we're just like with M'Baku and he's just kind of standing by the water. And there's just these two guys in like fishing in like 2 feet of water.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
I was like, did they film this like after the fact on like a little itty bitty set? Like, why does it look like this? And there were a lot of little moments like that where I thought like this should look better than it does.
I agree.
It should look more put together. Yeah.
I even felt like that a little bit with the climactic sequence with that big ship that they're on, and then they're trying to climb up the side of it. It felt like certain shots, like they didn't get the scale right. Like at certain times, it felt like, oh man, there's a lot of people on that boat, and then other times it's like there's like 40 people on that boat. And it's like, and then that just every time they go back to that. It's like, you know, the numbers I'm just thinking about, like, it just looks weird. And then, like, towards the end, they're kind of, like, backing them down towards one side of the ship. And then they're down to, like, there's, like, 12 dudes there. Yeah, there's, like, 12 people left. Like, there's, like, a
where did all the Wakandans go?
All their forces are just dead, like, just on the ship or overboard.
Yeah, and also we've never seen this massive ship before that seems specifically built for this exact purpose.
And why
they whipped that together real quick.
Yeah.
Also, like, you know, if she gets her own show, that's cool, and I get why they had to introduce her. But I felt like a lot of the Riri stuff wasn't working.
Completely unnecessary. How the fuck does she build her own like Iron Man suit?
And she can use it. She's like already a superhero. She's
amazing, just and like
that's the whole point of her character. For those of you who aren't familiar with her at all, and that might be both of you as well. Is she's a genius at MIT, and she reverse engineers the Iron Man suit.
Well, that makes sense now, but like...
Right, but outside of her, like, building that... So, first off, I mean, it works at the most basic like, move
level.
The story forward level of, like, she's a genius kid, and she built this thing. And that's, like, kind of works, but if you're trying to get to know the character a little bit, it's not enough.
No.
And then, once they get her...
to Wakanda,
there's really no point in having her there, and I also find it like impossible to believe that the Wakandans would actually let her fight at all.
Yeah.
Like, it was one thing when they were running and they were in MIT and she just threw her suit on that she had built that nobody knew she had, and they had to run and there was no time to plan.
Yeah.
But this, I don't know. She's like 17 or something, or she's 19.
19.
Yeah.
And
crazy valuable because she knows how to build this thing that everyone in the world wants.
Yeah. And the idea that like Shuri would be like, yeah, come on, we need you.
Yeah.
I just feel like she'd be like, no, you're a child. You're not gonna come fight.
I'm not gonna give you my amazing technology to like, help you tinker.
And it kind of felt weird
symbolically a little bit with how they're like sharing their world now. I just felt like more from like Riri's character perspective, there was no need for her after like outside of building the device that can find vibranium.
Yeah.
I also thought that, I don't know, like her and Shuri are just so similar. It felt like kind of just having a second Shuri. So as far as like a dynamic duo, they're just the same they have the same strengths and kind of the same weaknesses. And so, like they just didn't make a very interesting. It was just kind of like, well, I'm working in the lab. You can work in the lab too. Like,
the worst character to showcase Riri's strengths with, like, pair her with
in tandem with is Shuri.
Her and Okoye should have been like forced together, or something like.
Yeah, something along those lines. Should we talk about Namor, because we haven't talked about him at all, and he's a very big part of this story.
Yeah.
First of all, I know a lot of people are going to make fun of the wings on his feet.
I'm going to be one of them, so just sit tight.
I thought he looked cool as shit. I thought he was a very interesting villain. I loved how strong he was and how he absolutely took over the battlefield every time he was on it. He was fast and he was just incredible. Really, I thought he was good.
Agreed.
My only problem is I don't know what his mindset is in the entire movie. He's seemingly like psychotic, and then he's like, oh, actually. And then he's psychotic again. Like, I'm going to kill everybody. And then he's like, oh, well, actually. And then he's psychotic. He just bounces like from
the scene
far. And it's like, they're just
he reveals
we don't need to go to war. I'm going to kill either the surface world or I'm going to kill you guys. And it's like, we need like 5 more minutes of conversation. And this movie doesn't happen. Like,
everything escalates really quickly. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the Okoye thing, where it was just like, all of a sudden she's fired. Like, it felt like the movie had so many things going on that it doesn't have time to let some of them breathe. It just
and let Namor breathe a little bit more. I would have loved to see a little bit more of him. But sorry, Dylan, you were going to say something.
No, I was agreeing with your sentiments, and I also liked that they gave us a little flashback to like 1735. Yeah, and that was cool. I didn't see that coming. I mean, that was an interesting like origin story for him, and I just thought overall the guy who played him, maybe it was just that they picked the right guy, but I just thought he had a look and an attitude, and even though it was kind of his motivations, I wasn't, like you said, Adam, it was like when he's telling his like plans of world domination to Shuri the first time, it kind of feels like, wait, like I didn't think you were this type of guy, which I guess is what they were going for, but I don't know. It felt a little weird at the time, but in general, I liked him as a villain. I thought he was one of the better, one-off villains. Or maybe he'll be back, but
I hope he's back.
I hope he's back.
I think he'll be back for sure, and I think he's effective. I just think, I do think he's one of those characters that, and this is why I think he'll be back. And when these types of characters are done well, I think he's going to work a little bit as kind of like Magneto to like Wakanda's Professor X, where like sometimes their motivations and their goals overlap, and then they're allies, but then as soon as they don't, like Namor's just ready, like he's just all about, is it Telecon?
The teleconference.
Telecon. He's just all about Telecon first, and if Wakanda's interests overlap with that, they're going to be allies. And if they don't, then he's going to fight them. And I think that can be done in a really interesting way. And it adds sort of it's hard to call it like a sort of gray character because his morals are so black and white, but it's somebody who, depending on whatever story we're in, could be on the good or bad side of the conflict.
Yeah. I will say the biggest deal I had with him was, where he's saying like, I want to, like, my utmost important thing is to keep my people like not found. Like, I'm going to kill the Wakandans in case you even mention me to somebody else.
Yeah.
But then like the Americans knock on his door and he's like, I'm going to nuke the world. And it's like, what happened? Like that, those don't coexist in someone's mind. So that was a little disconcerting and confusing, but I thought he looked cool. So like,
I thought he looked
spear's
cool.
dope. Like the way he takes down some planes is sick.
I mean, I thought just
the movie, the flying,
like, even though it was kind of hard to see, and we should definitely touch on that, how like the movie looks at certain times. But just that whole concept of kind of the Atlantis, idea and Atlantis people, and kind of just, I think that's a good addition to the MCU. They needed something like this. They needed a fresh place that was on Earth and not in a different universe or on a different planet.
Yep.
A fresh place that's on Earth where these people in this place can kind of pop in, and it's like, oh yeah, the ocean is involved, so we should probably hit up Namor. Like, I like that, and like, I just like, I thought they had a very interesting look. I love the kind of Aztec Peruvian style to all of their stuff. Like, he always had the big like war headdress on. He looked cool. All of his little lackeys looked cool and unique. The one dude with the crazy like head, mantled thing, and then the chick who clearly is not to be trifled with because she was messing up everybody. So I liked it. I thought it was good. Kind of the same way that in Shang-Chi, that whole kind of world and those characters, I felt like were good, and it felt like they fit in the MCU world. So I like that. I think they pulled that off. So if they pop into future stuff, it'll feel like, okay,
I will say there's probably one other really important thing with him is he did mention that he was born a mutant, which I don't know where that
is
contract
important.
stands.
That's literally where the wings come from. That's the only part of him with the wings. And that was, I just could not take him seriously with those little ankle wings. And I understand this might just be a me problem, but it just looked so ridiculous to me to get this like Superman underwater dude who can also fly from his feet. I don't know. It just, I couldn't do it. And we are getting more into like a lot more into the sort of fantasy and mythology side of the MCU, where we started off with like Iron Man and Captain America and like Black Widow and Shield.
Yeah.
And it was all really very like grounded. And then like we had Thor, but it was like the only one.
Yeah, he was the only one who was more fantastical than everybody else.
And now it feels like just kind of every story essentially eventually leads its way. Even like Shang-Chi is a good example, where it just starts off with like these martial arts guys, and then they got these magic rings, whatever. But then all of a sudden we're in like Dragonland. And it's fine, but it's starting to reach the point for me where it just kind of feels like there aren't rules that anything needs to follow anymore. And there are so many super strength gods, basically, where that's part of my just issue with kind of Phase 4 as a whole. But that said, I mean, I think Namor's a good character. I just couldn't handle the ankle wings.
That's fair. Maybe that's from watching Hercules as a kid, and you remember what's his name?
Pegasus?
No, you remember who's the messenger?
Oh, yeah. Is it Hermes?
Hermes, I remember him because he's got the ankle wings, and then he floats and is really funny in that movie. So maybe that's what it is. But
they honestly they didn't bother me, and I kind of liked the part later when he's fighting Shuri and she cuts one of them off, and it's just like, oh. Like,
I mean,
what a move! Like,
I didn't even think about that, but ouch! And I liked the way that it was interesting because the juxtaposition of the Shuri and Namor fight, along with the like M'Baku and the Okoye fight, and what Riri's doing, like they showed us the ending of like all three of those fights simultaneously, which I didn't really like because I couldn't really track any of them like well, and I was like, no, and then also like the ending of the Okoye one is just lame. She just like kicks the dude. Like, no, like I wanted I don't know, I wanted more than that.
I also really hated their outfits at the end.
Yeah, that like night angel thing or whatever.
I don't think that looked as cool as they thought it looked.
No,
but I did like where it like ended up with Shuri and Namor with like the whole like their plan to dry him out, and then they're like she's trying to go to the desert, but then he blows up the thing, and then it's on the shoreline, and then he has to like get back to the water, and then she has to. I thought that was well done because it was like slow and it slowed everything down.
Sure.
It's well
yeah,
staged,
it was well staged, and then so I enjoyed that part of it too. I thought in general that ties in with Namor and with what we were saying about like Shuri being the stronger
thing
part.
I did want to mention is I think for the most part the costumes are top notch.
Yeah.
I particularly really liked what they had Angela Bassett wearing.
Yeah.
I just thought
cool
everything they did with her character in the entire thing, just her performance and kind of what they did, having her be the queen and kind of carrying this weight, and then what they had her wearing and like her death scene, like all of that. I was all about everything involved with Angela Bassett's character in this movie.
Agreed.
Yeah. She rose to the occasion. So just before we get to the stars, though, yeah. So, how do you guys feel about how it looked? Because I know, Adam, you mentioned it was really dark at times. I felt like there was a lot more blurriness than I was expecting, and I don't think it was just the theater that I saw it in. It was like, there's like one scene towards the very beginning where it's like her hand on T'Challa's like casket. And it goes like, oh, I think we lost Adam, but it's like Angela Bassett's hand on T'Challa's casket, and it goes like it focuses on like her hand, then Shuri's hand, then back to her hand, and the whole time it's just like it wasn't done as crisply, and it didn't look as good as I feel like I was expecting. And there was a lot of like some of the editing choices were just weird. I mean, how did you guys feel any of that when you were watching it? Just kind of an underwhelming nature and just how it looked.
So, Adam, did you just want to be on the other side of Dylan? Is that the?
Yeah, I got over here.
I completely X'd out of everything, so that was a quick.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of for me just goes back to the general like. I don't know if it's like laziness or like sloppiness or just sort of a like good enough attitude that a lot of Phase 4 stuff seems to have, and there are areas where that's not there. I think like the costume department very much was not like phoning it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Wakanda generally still looks pretty cool, but for me, it's just more like a lot of random individual shots rather than like the thing as a whole, but just like little moments where it just kind of felt like, why'd you
put
it
it that
like
way?
This?
Yeah.
Or why did you set it up that way? For me, was kind of more some of my issues, like some of the like blocking.
Yeah. I had a lot of
the more I think about that scene where they attack Wakanda with like the little lazy river in the middle of the city. So then like Shuri's in a car and she sees him get out of the like climbing out of the water, but he's like it felt like what is this place? Like, there's a stream that goes into Wakanda and it ends here in the middle of I don't know. It felt strange.
I think it was, to me, like the summation of all those individual shots that I noticed something looked out of place. It made the whole thing feel overall a little bit poor visually. But I do know that the MCU has had a lot of trouble retaining animation departments because they burn through people so quickly and they expect such a high level and they're not paying people very well. So like this has been a thing for a couple movies now that like they're going through a lot of different animation studios and people like they're not happy with the product and they're asking a lot and crunch time and all that stuff. So like actual real world people, especially over 2020 COVID, had a lot of issues with trying to get all the CGI done. Then let's talk about like this movie got rewritten like probably like halfway through and a lot of new stuff had to get added and new shots had to get built. And it was like, it's not within the budget and all that kind of stuff. So I know that there's issues that way. And that's what I'm going to put all of these visual issues on. But that's really still not an excuse for a Marvel movie. So
yeah, they can definitely afford to pay people.
Yeah, weird how like every one of these makes nearly $1 billion. You'd think you can pay people fairly, probably. So
out of the question.
All right. Anything else, or should we get to the stars?
Let's get to the stars.
We'll be right back.
All right. Adam, why don't you go first?
All right. So I have written down Angela Bassett, amazing. And that's carrying a lot of this movie for me. With some of the just bad things we just talked about. The pacing is slow and bad. The fights are bad. The armor's bad. The new character I wasn't a really big fan of. I appreciate that she's not going to fit into more stuff, but it just felt like a weird time to introduce her in Riri. I think I give it a 3. I mean, there's a lot of parts that I didn't enjoy, and the fact that it's 2 hours and 40 minutes was way too long. But we've talked about it's overstuffed. They're trying to do too much, but they're trying to make up for the hole that Chadwick Boseman left. And they do a masterful job at honoring him, and that the opening crawl with only Chadwick Boseman's images in the Marvel.
That was cool.
That was super fucking cool. And we both got chills. I went with my girlfriend. My girlfriend and I were both like, that was really fucking awesome. And she was like, it was. So that was really great. And I love the homage they did at the beginning and the one that they did at the end. There's some surprising bits with Killmonger. Angela Bassett tops it all. She brings it up to a 3 for me.
I can go next.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much right in lockstep with Adam on this. This movie does a phenomenal job honoring Chadwick Boseman and dealing with his legacy and how that's going to live on through T'Challa's family in this movie. All that stuff is done really well. Everything else, I think Namor's written well. I just have a weird problem with his ankle wings, but that has nothing to do with like how his character's written.
Yeah.
I just think it's a weird look. I think it's an interesting villain to add to the MCU, and I hope they continue to use him. I'm excited for the Ironheart show because I like that character. I think after the first hour of this movie, she's pretty useless, and the script didn't really have anything to do with her other than she was just like there.
Yeah, she was around.
Right. So I liked seeing her just introduced, period. That was cool for me, but could have been handled a little better as the story went on. And then, it's just otherwise it's overstuffed and kind of clunky and really inconsistent all the way through. So I mean, overall, I enjoyed myself because they did some things at like an A+ level. And those were the most important things for me for this one. Yeah. They're not going to have that for like Black Panther 3 at some point. So they got to kind of step their game back up with as far as the rest of the story goes. But for this, it just does such a good job of honoring Chadwick Boseman that I got to give it a 3.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think just slight disappointment because I thought this would be the biggest one we've had in this entire phase, and I put too much pressure on it, and that's my fault. But Dylan, what do you got?
Well, so I mean, let's start with the bad. I think I'm in agreement. Sounds like we're all kind of in agreement with some of the weak spots of the movie. Besides me not being bothered by the foot wings and Nate just being unable to look past the foot wings.
I can't handle it. I mean, you've known me my entire life, and when have I ever said I want foot wings?
Foot wings. I know you. Yeah, always. That goes way back. So like, and Adam, you know, the lack of memorable, like, great fight scenes. Honestly, my favorite fight scene was Okoye versus the big fish man on the bridge, and I don't even know what that guy's name was. Yeah, and I don't think that should be the best fight of the whole thing with a guy that I don't even know his name was. But that was my favorite fight, hand to hand, of the whole movie for sure. So a lot of issues, and it is overstuffed. It's very long. We've already touched on some of the storylines, subplots that just kind of take up time. But everything that sticks to the core, the Shuri getting over the loss of T'Challa, and Queen Ramonda having to deal with everything that had to do with them, I thought was executed really well. I thought the villain was intriguing, and I thought that just the whole concept of kind of city versus city, they both have this, this power, and so obviously they're going to go against each other. Thank God they don't work together. That wouldn't have been as fun of a movie. Mm-hmm. They just kill everyone on the surface land, and then it's just. But
Western world.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason that I moved it up to, I'm going to give it a 3.5, higher than you guys. And honestly, when I walked out of the theater, I was kind of close to a 4, is because this movie actually gave me the feeling of the golden era Marvel movies. This one, and I feel like I really had missed that with the other Phase 4 movies that have come out. Or they're either too kind of goofy and wacky and comedy centered, or it's like Eternals and it's like way too high concept stuff and just kind of stale characters, or like it's multiverse craziness. Like, I just feel like this one was the first one that I felt, maybe since like Avengers Endgame, or just even the ones before that, where it really felt like a sturdy kind of epic you feel like you're in an adventure and like and you're in that comic book world. This movie a lot of times gave me that feeling, and just because of that, I have to say 3.5. I think it's definitely the best Phase 4 movie, or my favorite. And even I don't know, I just think that they nailed that, and it felt serious in a way.
Like, I know what you mean by that. My girlfriend and I, when we walked out of the theater, we're on opposite ends. I was at more of like a 3 and was like, all right, well, there's some things I didn't like. She's like, I loved it. Loved every minute of it. Thought it was
right.
good.
And I think
because it felt that way to her. It felt like, well, this feels like Infinity War stuff. Everything is solid and you know what you're getting and everything's good.
Yes, that's I think that's why a lot of people that, I've seen a lot of people really, really love it, and they think it's, just as good as the first one, or definitely like one of their favorite movies of the year. And I think it's just because we've been so hungry for that kind of hard to describe Marvel feeling when it's all coming together, and it's just like everyone in the theater is just like, like this is like we're in the, this is a big epic adventure that ties into another, big epic adventure and all these different characters. I just felt like, I don't know, the audience was captivated, at least in the theater that I saw it in, and I just kind of had that feeling in the air. So, I'd like to give it a 4, but for some of the reason we talked about, 3.5. And also, I mean, I just didn't think the comedy was that on point too. I don't know if, I don't know what your theater was like, but most jokes didn't land.
The scene in Riri's dorm room was like not funny at all.
Yeah.
And
the stuff with Martin Freeman and Julia Louis-Dreyfus was
that
stuff
was
tough.
almost none of that was good.
And why do we need to know that they used to be married? Why does that matter? Like,
it'll matter. Like,
another unnecessary thing. Like, Julia Louis-Dreyfus didn't need to be in this. We could have just had generic,
not at all.
Yeah, generic boss higher up.
What's funny is
like
this is the one movie. This is the one movie that they've included that actually has more of a link to the larger, like, next story that we're about to tell, like the next Avengers story, like, because she's in it, and she's got stuff to do. None of the other ones have really done anything with that, which I'm okay with. I know a lot of people don't like, but like because the original first couple of Marvel movies were all self-contained, and then they brought in the Avengers stuff.
Yes,
they're adding her in now, so it's maybe that'll set up a little bit better, but. I didn't like her in this, so
at this point, I think for sure for me, if we're talking about things that can set up future things down the road, I think that this and Shang-Chi did the best job. And I kind of these types of movies are what I had in mind. For Phase 4. And then they kind of got away with it with some of the other ones, but this is kind of what I was expecting. And
because you mentioned Eternals before we get out of here, I just need to. When are we going to get back to that giant hand that is sticking out of the ocean? Part of the world now.
This would have been space. This would have been a perfect movie.
That's where the fight should have taken place.
Yes, that's actually a great call. They should have gone to that structure and built their defense around that.
The best thing Eternals did was give us the giant hand sticking out of the earth.
Yeah,
and we have not seen it since. And I need to know when it's coming back. And it better not be Eternals 2.
Yeah,
we need to show up in something else.
It's got to do something else.
Yeah.
Now, I should say I haven't seen Miss Marvel or She-Hulk, so if it's in one of those, sorry.
That's fair.
But I haven't seen it since, and those are the only 2 things I've missed.
Yeah. And then I guess just before we go, and we probably should have done some prep for this show on this, what is the next Marvel movie coming out? What's
Ant-Man 3.
Okay, Ant-Man 3.
Which I'm actually pretty pumped for, because the Ant-Man movies are great. And I think we do get Jonathan Majors as his character from Loki as the villain in Ant-Man 3. So I think that's kind of the movie that's going to like push us forward towards the next couple of Avengers movies.
Okay, cool. I like that. All right. Well, so 3 from both of you and a 3.5 from me, but at least we can all agree that, it wasn't a dud. They didn't completely miss. And if someone was to say this is one of their favorite movies of the year, I cannot hold it against them, because it just felt like finally, like, Marvel actually kind of got it right again.
Yeah.
And it felt epic. All right. Nate, is it your turn to put a wrap on the show?
It is.
All right. Take it away.
The world has taken too much from you to still be considered a child.